Thomas, the master, and Elizabeth, his wife, held a dark secret on their Georgia plantation. But Samuel, the young enslaved man, became the unwilling pawn in a twisted plan that would shock generations. In the year 1824, deep in the countryside of Georgia, there stood a large plantation surrounded by endless cotton fields and tall oak trees. To outsiders, the land appeared calm and prosperous, a symbol of success in the Southern economy. But beneath this quiet surface existed a world built on fear, violence, and absolute control. The plantation was owned by a white master whose wealth came directly from the forced labor of dozens of enslaved people. He ruled his land with strict discipline, believing cruelty was the only way to maintain order. Every movement on the plantation was watched, every mistake punished without mercy. The master's house sat at the center, large and imposing, a constant reminder of power. Inside lived his wife, a woman trapped by expectations of society and marriage. Her value, like everything else on the plantation, was measured by usefulness. Years had passed without her giving birth to a child, and this failure weighed heavily on the household. In a society obsessed with bloodlines and inheritance, the absence of an heir was seen as weakness. The master's frustration grew quietly, turning into obsession. Among the enslaved workers was a young man whose strength and appearance had drawn attention. He lived like the others, bound by chains of ownership, fear, and silence. None of them knew that his life was about to change in a way far more terrifying than the fields or the whip. As the summer heat settled over the land, something dark began to take shape within the master's mind. A plan rooted in entitlement and cruelty was forming, one that would violate every boundary of humanity. The plantation, already stained by suffering, was about to become the setting of a secret so disturbing it would be hidden for generations. As the months passed, the pressure inside the master's house grew heavier. The absence of a child became a constant source of shame for the family, especially in a society where lineage defined status and power. Visitors came and went, offering polite smiles and quiet judgments. Each visit reminded the master that his legacy was uncertain. Rather than accept this reality, he became consumed by the idea that an heir must be created at any cost. His pride would not allow weakness, and his authority convinced him that no rule applied to him. The master began observing the enslaved people more closely, studying them with calculating interest. One man, younger and physically strong, stood out. The attention was unsettling and unusual. This man was pulled away from the fields more often, given small privileges that made others suspicious. Extra food, lighter labor, and fewer punishments created silent tension among the enslaved community. No one dared ask questions, because questions often led to pain. Inside the house, the master's wife lived under silent pressure. Her daily life became strictly controlled, her movements watched, her health examined constantly. She was treated less like a person and more like a vessel expected to fulfill a purpose. Fear and confusion followed her everywhere. She sensed that something unnatural was coming but had no power to resist it. The plan took shape slowly, hidden behind locked doors and late-night routines. The master believed ownership justified his actions, seeing human lives as tools to fix his problem. Every decision was calculated to protect his reputation. The plantation continued its daily rhythm, but beneath the routine, a dangerous secret was forming, one that would trap the enslaved man and the mistress of the house in a situation neither could escape. The situation moved from planning to action under strict control and secrecy. The enslaved man was taken from his usual quarters and placed closer to the main house, separated from the others to prevent questions or bonds that could spread suspicion. His isolation was intentional. He understood that obedience was the only way to survive, even though fear followed him constantly. Any sign of resistance would have been treated as rebellion, and rebellion never ended well on that land. The master oversaw everything with cold focus. He believed power gave him the right to control bodies, choices, and futures. Nothing was left to chance. The wife was kept under watch, her daily routine altered and monitored. She lived in silence, carrying a burden she could not name aloud. Her role was reduced to fulfilling an expectation forced upon her, while her identity slowly disappeared behind duty and fear. The house, once a place of routine comfort, became tense and suffocating. Servants sensed the change but avoided attention. The enslaved man felt the weight of danger growing heavier each day. He knew that once his role was fulfilled, his life could easily be discarded to erase evidence. Survival meant silence, compliance, and waiting. Outside, the plantation continued to function as normal. Crops were planted, overseers shouted orders, and visitors saw nothing unusual. Inside, however, something deeply wrong was unfolding. The master believed he was protecting his legacy, but in reality, he was creating a crime rooted in cruelty and control. Each passing day tightened the trap around everyone involved. What was happening could never be undone, and the consequences were slowly moving toward a moment when the truth would demand a price, whether the master was ready or not. As time went on, the changes on the plantation became harder to hide. The enslaved man chosen for the master's secret grew quieter and more distant. His eyes carried constant worry, and his body showed signs of stress rather than relief. Other enslaved workers noticed his absence from the fields and the strange way overseers avoided speaking his name. Fear spread silently among them, because unexplained favor often led to sudden punishment. No one trusted kindness that came from power. The master became increasingly secretive. He started keeping records late at night, writing details that he believed would protect him if anything went wrong. These papers were locked away carefully, hidden from both servants and family. His trust in others disappeared, replaced by suspicion and anger. Small mistakes by workers were met with harsh discipline, as if fear alone could keep the truth buried. The plantation's atmosphere grew tense, and even routine tasks felt dangerous. The wife's condition changed as well. She became withdrawn and physically weak, spending long periods confined indoors. Those who attended to her sensed deep distress, but dared not speak of it. Her isolation mirrored that of the enslaved man, binding them together in a shared silence enforced by fear. Both were trapped by the master's need for control and his obsession with appearances. Rumors began forming beyond the plantation. Neighbors noticed unusual behavior and long absences from public gatherings. While no one knew the full truth, suspicion slowly took root. The master sensed this and tightened his grip further, believing that force and secrecy would keep his world intact. But with each passing day, the weight of the hidden crime grew heavier. The plantation, once orderly on the surface, was now fragile, balanced on a secret that threatened to destroy everything if exposed. The moment the pregnancy could no longer be hidden, the master shifted his behavior once again. In public, he presented himself as proud and relieved, accepting congratulations from visitors and neighbors. The plantation hosted small gatherings meant to show success and stability. To the outside world, the household appeared blessed, and the master's reputation seemed restored. No one questioned the sudden change, because challenging a wealthy man's story was dangerous in itself. Inside the house, fear replaced celebration. The wife understood that the child now made her situation more dangerous, not safer. Every movement she made was watched more closely than before. Her health declined as stress and anxiety consumed her. She carried not only the weight of pregnancy, but the knowledge that the truth could destroy lives if it surfaced. The enslaved man felt this danger even more strongly. His existence had become a threat to the master's image. The master began preparing for every possible outcome. He studied family records, portraits, and inherited features, searching for ways to explain any differences that might appear. His concern was not for the child, but for control of the story. He believed that if he could shape perception, he could escape blame. This belief led him to darker thoughts about removing risks rather than protecting people. The enslaved man sensed that his role was nearing its end. His treatment shifted from cautious protection to cold distance. He was watched constantly, restricted from contact with others, and reminded through actions that his life depended on silence. Survival became a daily calculation. The plantation continued its routines, but the air felt heavy. Every person involved understood that once the child arrived, the balance of power would change. What seemed like success on the surface was actually the beginning of the most dangerous phase. The secret had produced proof, and proof could no longer be undone. The moment the pregnancy could no longer be hidden, the master shifted his behavior once again. In public, he presented himself as proud and relieved, accepting congratulations from visitors and neighbors. The plantation hosted small gatherings meant to show success and stability. To the outside world, the household appeared blessed, and the master's reputation seemed restored. No one questioned the sudden change, because challenging a wealthy man's story was dangerous in itself. Inside the house, fear replaced celebration. The wife understood that the child now made her situation more dangerous, not safer. Every movement she made was watched more closely than before. Her health declined as stress and anxiety consumed her. She carried not only the weight of pregnancy, but the knowledge that the truth could destroy lives if it surfaced. The enslaved man felt this danger even more strongly. His existence had become a threat to the master's image. The master began preparing for every possible outcome. He studied family records, portraits, and inherited features, searching for ways to explain any differences that might appear. His concern was not for the child, but for control of the story. He believed that if he could shape perception, he could escape blame. This belief led him to darker thoughts about removing risks rather than protecting people. The enslaved man sensed that his role was nearing its end. His treatment shifted from cautious protection to cold distance. He was watched constantly, restricted from contact with others, and reminded through actions that his life depended on silence. Survival became a daily calculation. The plantation continued its routines, but the air felt heavy. Every person involved understood that once the child arrived, the balance of power would change. What seemed like success on the surface was actually the beginning of the most dangerous phase. The secret had produced proof, and proof could no longer be undone. As the expected birth grew closer, the master's sense of control began to slip. His confidence turned into constant paranoia, and his temper became unpredictable. He no longer trusted the routines that once kept his household orderly. Overseers were ordered to watch more closely, and servants were punished for the smallest delays or mistakes. Fear became the tool he relied on most, believing it could silence questions and prevent disobedience. The plantation felt like it was holding its breath. The enslaved man was kept almost completely out of sight. He was confined to isolated spaces, allowed out only when necessary, and closely monitored at all times. This sudden restriction made his danger clear. He understood that once the child was born, his usefulness would end. History had taught him that evidence was often erased, not protected. Each day felt borrowed, and survival depended on staying invisible and compliant. The master's wife suffered quietly as well. Her health worsened, not only from the strain of pregnancy, but from the constant fear of what would follow. She was denied comfort and reassurance, treated instead as another part of the plan. The master focused only on outcomes, not consequences. His obsession with legacy blinded him to the destruction unfolding inside his own home. Beyond the plantation, small signs of trouble appeared. Supplies were requested at unusual hours, and strangers were turned away more often than before. Neighbors noticed the master's absence from social events and his increasingly erratic behavior. Though no one spoke openly, concern began to spread. Rumors, once formed, were difficult to stop. The master responded by planning his escape from blame. He considered false accusations, forced removals, and official explanations designed to protect his name. In his mind, power meant he could rewrite reality. But the closer the birth came, the more unstable everything became. The secret that once felt manageable now threatened to. The child arrived during the darkest hours of the night, when the plantation was quiet and most workers were kept away. The birth was rushed and tense, handled in secrecy to avoid attention. At first, the master felt relief that the long wait was over. But that feeling did not last. As the child was examined, subtle details began to raise silent alarm. Certain features did not match the family line the master proudly claimed. What had been feared for months now stood in front of him, impossible to fully deny. Panic replaced planning. The master understood that appearances mattered more than truth in his world, and any doubt could destroy his status. He immediately took control of the situation, deciding what would be seen, recorded, and remembered. The household was ordered into silence. Servants were warned through punishment and fear that nothing about this night was ever to be discussed. The official story was created quickly, repeated until it sounded real. The enslaved man became the greatest threat. His existence alone endangered the lie now being forced into place. The master's behavior toward him turned openly hostile. Where there had once been cautious protection, there was now blame and accusation. The enslaved man was accused of imagined wrongs, setting the stage for punishment meant to remove him from the plantation without raising suspicion. His life depended entirely on decisions made by someone determined to erase responsibility. The wife was pushed further into isolation. Her role was finished, and her distress no longer mattered to the master. She was kept away from visitors, her condition explained as weakness rather than trauma. The child, meanwhile, was claimed publicly as legitimate, wrapped in privilege and protection built on lies. Though the master believed he had regained control, the household felt fractured. Fear was everywhere, and the truth lingered just beneath the surface. What had been created could not be undone. Just as the master believed the situation was under control, an unexpected crisis disrupted the plantation. A sudden illness spread among workers and servants, forcing the household to seek help from outside. Doctors and helpers arrived, bringing unfamiliar eyes into a place built on secrecy. The master tried to limit their movement, but necessity weakened his authority. For the first time in months, the plantation could not fully hide itself. During this period of confusion, routines broke down. Locked rooms were opened, and private areas were entered by people who had never been allowed inside before. In the rush to treat the sick, careful boundaries were ignored. Small details that once went unnoticed began to stand out. Records did not match timelines. Behaviors seemed inconsistent. The master's effort to control every detail started to unravel. One of the visitors noticed irregularities in the household documents. Dates related to the pregnancy and confinement did not align with the public story. Supplies had been ordered at odd times, and certain names appeared repeatedly in records without clear explanation. These observations were not accusations yet, but they raised quiet concern. Once suspicion forms, it rarely disappears. The master sensed danger and reacted with anger rather than caution. He attempted to restrict access again, but the illness had already created a need for transparency. His behavior only made matters worse. People began to talk quietly, sharing doubts without fully understanding the truth. Each shared concern added weight to the growing suspicion. Meanwhile, the enslaved man was moved suddenly, taken away from the plantation under vague reasons. This action was meant to protect the master, but it had the opposite effect. Sudden removals always attracted attention. The wife was confined further, declared unstable to prevent questions. The secret, once tightly controlled, now existed beyond the master's reach. It was no longer just Even though the case never reached a public court, the truth refused to disappear entirely. Hidden documents, private letters, and quiet recollections preserved pieces of what had happened, carrying the story forward in fragments. The plantation returned to the outward appearance of calm, with cotton fields tended and daily routines followed, but beneath the surface, the memory of the crime lingered. Fear, guilt, and unspoken knowledge shaped the lives of those who had survived it. The enslaved man, removed from the plantation under false charges, lived with the constant reminder of how easily power could destroy a life. Though he survived physically, freedom remained a distant concept. The wife, sent away and labeled unstable, lived with isolation and shame. Her voice had been silenced, her experience reframed as weakness or hysteria to protect the reputation of the master. The child, meanwhile, grew in a world built on lies, his lineage carefully crafted to preserve appearances rather than truth. Each person affected carried invisible scars, even as outsiders believed the household had returned to normal. Over time, the story became part of whispered history. Neighbors, workers, and descendants remembered fragments and passed them down quietly, preserving the reality that the master had tried so desperately to erase. The plantation itself, once a symbol of wealth and authority, now held a hidden legacy of cruelty, manipulation, and injustice. This story remains a chilling reminder of the power imbalance of the era, showing how authority could enforce crimes without consequence. It reflects a world in which lives were controlled, voices silenced, and justice denied. Even nearly 2 centuries later, the events of 1824 in Georgia stand as a haunting example of abuse and secrecy, a crime hidden in plain sight, but never truly forgotten.